Watermelon sugar.
How this girl almost got away with killing her entire family. On March 1st, 2008, two intruders broke into the cafe's home in Texas and brutally attacked Terry and Penny along with their two young sons. They shot them multiple times and hacked them up with a samurai sword before they lit the house on fire. One of the intruders was 18-year-old Charlie Wilkinson, boyfriend to 16-year-old Erin Caffey. Just prior to the attack, her parents had told her she could no longer see Charlie, so her solution was to get Charlie to kill them. What they didn't know is that Terry Caffey didn't die of the multiple gunshot wounds or the fire. Instead, he crawled an hour to his neighbor's house. He was taken to the hospital and he survived. Terry told authorities that he recognized one of the intruders as Charlie. Police went to his house and they found Erin there. Police soon realized she hadn't been kidnapped as she claimed. Instead, she had masterminded the entire plot and was given life in prison.
It's time for cookies and crime. In a previous video, I said the zodiac sign with the most views in the zodiac sign serial killer series would get another episode, and that sign is Aquarius. I'll also do another cookies and crime for the zodiac sign with the least amount of views, Sagittarius. I'm looking at you. Y'all deserved more love, but TikTok was having a day and decided to put me at the bottom of their algorithm. But it's alright, because you guys get another episode. But back to Aquarius. This is the story of Jerry Brudos. Brudos was born January 31st, 1939 in Webster, South Dakota. His mother always wanted a girl and was very upset when she found out she was having another son. This made him subject to emotional and physical abuse by his mother. Later on in his childhood, his family settled later into Salem, Oregon. Brudos developed a fetish for women's shoes at the age of 5 after playing with stiletto-heeled shoes at a local junkyard. He also had a fetish for women's underwear and claimed that he would steal underwear from female neighbors as a child. He would spend his teenage years in and out of psychotherapy and psychiatric hospitals. At the age of 17, he stalked, abducted, and beat a young woman, threatening to stab her if she did not follow his sexual demands. After he was arrested, he was taken to a psychiatric ward where he stayed for 9 months. There, they discovered Brudos' sexual fantasies revolved around his hatred towards his mother and women in general. He was also diagnosed with schizophrenia. In 1961, when he was 22, Brudos married a 17-year-old girl, Darcy, who he had 2 children with. He made his wife do housework naked except for a pair of high heels while he took pictures. He began dressing in women's clothes and used a female persona as a form of escape mechanism. On January 26, 1968, 19-year-old Linda Slauson knocked on Brudos' door to see if he wanted to buy any encyclopedias. He lured her to the basement and knocked her out with a wooden plank and strangled her. He then cut off her left foot with a hacksaw and kept it in a freezer and used it to model his collection of high-heel shoes. He disposed the rest of the body in the Willamette River. On November 26, 1968, 23-year-old Jan Susan Whitney's car broke down on Interstate 5. Brudos offered to drive her to his home so that she can call a tow truck. But while in the car, he strangled her with a leather strap and did things to her body post-mortem. He kept the body hanging from the pulley in his garage for several days, during which he dressed, photographed, and had sex with it. He then cut off one of her breasts and made a resin mold out of it that he used as a paperweight. On April 23, 1969, he abducted 22-year-old Linda Saley from a shopping mall parking lot. He brought her to his garage where he raped and strangled her and played with her corpse. He decided not to cut her breasts off because they were too pink, and instead drove an electrical current through the body in an attempt to make it jump, which failed. Sorry, there's a very short part 2. Here's part 2 of the Jerry Brudos story. In total, Brudos murdered 4 young women and attempted to attack 2 others. He would dress up in high heels and touch himself after every murder he committed. In May 1969, a fisherman found 2 bodies in the Long Tom River. Police asked students at a nearby university about suspicious men, and one led them to Brudos, who phoned her several times to ask her for a date. Brudos gave them a false address, which increased their suspicions. At his garage, the police found copper wire that was determined to have been cut with the same tool that cut the cords used to tie the bodies. Brudos was arrested and made a full confession. On June 28, 1969, Brudos pled guilty to 3 first-degree murders. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of life imprisonment. He died in 2006 from cancer.
How is it possible to vanish into thin air while physically talking to another person? This is the strange disappearance of Brandon Swanson. On May 13, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon attended a couple of parties to celebrate completing his very first year of college at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, Minnesota. The first party Brandon attended was in Lind, which is about 7 miles from Marshall, Minnesota, where he lived. There, he chatted with friends, had a beer or two, and decided to leave around 10:30 to 11:30 p.m. Friends at this party claimed that Brandon did not seem intoxicated and was very clear-headed. Brandon then went to a party in Canby, which is about 30 miles away from Lind and Marshall. There, he had one shot of whiskey and at around midnight decided it was time to go home. And again, his friends stated that at this party, he still did not seem intoxicated. Brandon normally took Highway 68 home. It was a straight shot and he had driven it many times. But on this night, for whatever reason, he decided to take a back road home. At around 1:15 a.m., Brandon drove his Chevrolet Lumina into a ditch and was unable to get out. 30 minutes later, he called his parents asking them to come and pick him up, giving them very specific directions of where exactly he was at and that he was near Lind. His parents, Annette and Brian, stayed on the phone with him until they got to where Brandon said he was, but they couldn't see him. They both agreed to flash their headlights as a signal, but they still couldn't see each other. This was odd as this particular area is super flat and would be easy to see each other. At 2:17 a.m., Brandon, being frustrated that they couldn't find him, tells his parents that he sees Lind's city lights and is just going to walk there to grab a friend. He tells them that he's going to cut through fields to make the walk shorter and is actively describing what he sees, a couple of fences, that he could hear running water, and that he's walking on a gravel road. At around 3:10 a.m., 47 minutes into the phone call with his parents, Brandon yells, "Oh shit," and the call ends. His parents repeatedly try calling him back, but he never answers. They search along Highway 68, but find no trace of him. At 6:30 the next morning, they report Brandon missing to the police, in which they said it wasn't unusual for a young man Brandon's age to stay out all night, and that he, quote, had a right to be missing, end quote. Eventually, police do start looking for him and pull up his cell phone records. Through pings, they found Brandon was actually near Porter when he called his parents, not Lind, like he said, which is about 25 miles away. Upon further investigation, police found Brandon's car about 1.5 miles from Taunton. It was on a gravel road, and because of that, there were no footprints indicating which way Brandon went. Extensive ground and air searches were conducted, but absolutely no trace of Brandon was found. Bloodhounds were brought in and tracked his scent down Country Road 16 onto an abandoned driveway of a farm next to Yellow Medicine River and at one point in the river but getting back out and then leading to a drainage point. There his scent ends. The river was searched for 30 days but turned up absolutely nothing. What Brandon saw that night that made him yell, "Oh shit," remains a mystery. It has now been 13 years and Brandon's disappearance remains unsolved. To this day, Brandon's parents leave their light on in hopes one day he will come back home.
Let's talk about a girl who was tortured and murdered by an entire family, and the people in the neighborhood either knew what was going on and stayed quiet or they participated in it. To this day, this is still labeled one of the worst crimes in Indiana history. Her name is Sylvia Lyons, and she was 16 years old at the time. By the way, this happened in 1949. Her family was going through a rough patch, and one day, to feed her family, her mother decided that she was going to steal food from a store. While doing this, she got caught up with the police and went to jail. Her father got a big opportunity to work at a carnival. The only problem is that he needed someone to watch his 2 daughters, so he was introduced to a friend of a friend. This person was Gertrude Banascusi, also known as Gertrude Wright. Although she had 7 kids and lived in a ran-down house, Sylvia's father still thought it would be a good idea for her and her other sister, Jenny, to go live with Gertrude. In return, he would pay Gertrude $20 every week. All was well until one week the check did not show up, so Gertrude was mad about this and she took Sylvia and Jenny upstairs and started beating them. The next day the check arrived. This set the tone for how Gertrude would continue to treat Sylvia. I feel like Jenny was excluded because she had polio. Anytime Jenny or Sylvia would do something wrong, Gertrude would beat them. Eventually she got older and her body grew weaker, so she couldn't keep up the beatings. This is also around the time where she would allow her children and children from the neighborhood to abuse Sylvia. They would put her in chokeholds, let her pass out from not being able to breathe, hit her in her head, and even put out their cigarettes on her skin. She would just watch this and tell them to keep going. She would encourage them to do more to her. Used as a punching bag, and there was even one time where she was hit so hard by Gertrude's daughter that she broke her arm, and she would use her cast to continue to beat Sylvia. Gertrude would tell everybody in the neighborhood that Sylvia was sleeping around with everyone and that she was actually pregnant. This was never true. Sylvia never even had intercourse. She would make Sylvia stand in the living room and perform sexual acts on herself. Her private area had so much trauma to it that she couldn't use the bathroom on her own, and she would urinate and poop on herself. Were actually shocked by how much trauma she had to that area. Gertrude once heated up a hot needle and carved this into her skin. Time Sylvia was kept in the basement, and she would often bang on the doors and on the walls with shovels, and actually neighbors heard this, but they never ever reported it until she was found dead. There's so much more to the story, but that's all I have time for. So if you guys would like a part 2 or like a follow-up, let me know in the comments below. What I will say is everyone involved in this crime did go to jail, and her sister Jenny helped solve her murder. Rest in peace, Sylvia Lyons.
Imagine massacring some of your wife's family during Christmas Eve's dinner because she filed for divorce. On Christmas Eve 2008, Alicia Ortega and Jose Ortega were hosting Christmas in their home in Covina, California. Their 5 children were there, as well as their children's families, like wives, husbands, kids. In total, there was about 30 people in the home celebrating Christmas. At around 11:30 p.m., just around the time everybody was wrapping up to head out, the doorbell rang. 8-year-old at the time, Katrina, went to answer the door, and a Santa Claus was at the other side. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Santa Claus pulls out a gun and shot Katrina in the face. He was armed with a homemade flamethrower, semi-automatic rifle, and 3 9mm guns. He then went crazy and just started shooting all around the home. He ended up killing 9 victims in total. Here is a list of all of the victims' names. The so-called Santa Claus was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, who was Sylvia's husband. Now, Bruce was a very sketchy character. He had told Sylvia that he had no kids from any other marriage, even though he completely lied and did, though he neglected them. He wouldn't have a joint account with Sylvia and just wasn't a good person or husband altogether. But for some reason, it really shocked him when Sylvia asked for a divorce. After massacring her family, it's suspected that Bruce was going to try to escape to Illinois, but was too badly injured when he actually hurt himself after he set their home up on fire, and instead drove to his brother's home, where he ended up fatally shooting himself. Now, out of about 30 people, Bruce ended up murdering 9 of them. He had about 3 people that were injured, including Katrina, who was shot in the face, but she survived. And the rest of them were able to escape because they were more towards the back end of the home. Honestly, I'm shooketh with this case. I don't understand. I will never understand why people just get so mad when they get broken up with or divorced. Like, what are you doing? There's a lot more details to this case, but I didn't have enough time to cover it because the most that I'm really offered is 3 minutes, and I didn't want to do multiple parts. So if you're more curious about this case and want to know more, do some research. There's so many articles and YouTubers, I believe, that have covered this case, if not podcasts. But yes, it is insane and tragic and just shocking. Let me know your thoughts down below.
Imagine murdering your wife and your 2 baby boys. This is the Coleman family case. Chris, Sherry, and their 2 sons, Garrett and Gavin, who were 11 and 9, seemed like the perfect, happy family living in Columbia, Illinois. Chris worked as a bodyguard for celebrities, so he made hella money. One of the celebrities that Chris bodyguarded for was Joyce Meyer. Joyce is a Christian author and speaker. Joyce had a very strict policy, and her policy stated that any of her employees who got a divorce or filed for a divorce would be fired. I don't know if that's legal. Is it? Probably is. While traveling for work, he sparked an affair with a local cocktail waitress, Tara Lentz, who he met because she was an old friend of Sherry's. Like, homegirl, that is #1 policy between girl code. You don't go after your friend's man. Just saying. Chris gave Tara a promise ring and told her how much he wanted to marry her and be with her, etc. But he had a problem. Divorce wasn't an option because then he would lose one of his most high-paying celebrities, Joyce Meyer. No divorce policy, remember? In 2009, out of nowhere, Chris Coleman started to develop an unexpected enemy that no one knew who it was. He was getting emails from an account that was named destroychris@gmail.com. Magically, these emails started to come in after Tara gave Chris a deadline to break up with Sherry, which was May 4th, 2009. This is one of the emails. I'm going to move so you can pause it and read it. On May 5th, 2009, Chris had been at the gym when he called his neighbor to check on his family. Chris stated that he couldn't get a hold of his wife and she's typically up by the time that he's at the gym. When entering the home, there was red spray painted words all over the walls. They were stating things like, "You have paid, you are punished, I've been watching you," etc. and a bunch of bad words. Chris would end up arriving to the scene with forced tears, having his hands crossed because he was attempting to hide scratches. He didn't even ask how they were murdered. It became very apparent very soon to police officers that Chris was behind all of this. His affair came out, the emails were traced back to one of his computers, even the writing on the wall matched Chris's handwriting. In 2011, Chris was found guilty and convicted for strangling his family. He was sentenced to 3 life terms without the possibility of parole. As for these 3 beautiful innocent victims, I'm just so sorry that this happened to you guys, and I hope y'all are resting in peace. Quick PSA, there is something called divorce and not being a selfish prick. So if husbands could stop killing their wives and children to be with their mistresses, that would be awesome. And same for men being killed by women. Stop killing partners, just get a divorce.